Hello, and welcome to the Madison podcast. It is I, your host 90% of the time on this podcast, Ben Lavender, New York's favorite British mortgage broker. Hopefully by now that message has reached the masses. Time will tell. We have a lovely guest today who has been an attendee of my CE events, is how we initially met, and slowly got to know our guest, and I feel that you will get not only some value today, but some entertainment, especially for those of you who are sweet lovers. Janet Straub, welcome to, or Jan, you go by, right? Go by yes. Jan. So welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on. I know it's very overwhelming with the thousands of people that we have watching here in the back.
Keep it down.
Yeah, guys, can
keep it down.
Seriously, relax. Anthony, you too. Stop egging them on. But thank you for coming on. Please introduce yourself, tell the people who you are and what you do.
Well, hello, I'm Janet Straub. I'm with Epique Realty, and I am a VA loan specialist. I take care of my military, my veterans, first responders. They're my tribe. Exceptionally
well. And Jan knows, when you say VA loan expert, I'm glad that you said it that way, because even though you're a realtor, right, but you know more about VA loans than the average loan officer. You've even taught me, I'm sure, a couple things over our discussions over the past few months on VA loans. I'm sure you've even taught me a couple things. So it's really great not only to have you here, but to have you to talk about that, because I feel that veterans are underserved throughout New York, but more particularly Long Island and the five boroughs, right?
Absolutely. It's not that there is a huge contingency of active duty military coming in, although they are, but there's a massive prejudice against VA loans.
Yes.
And there is a lack of regard, collectively, not everywhere, but a lack of regard for the specific lifestyle that our military members have to live and the way they have to find a house. And it's my goal to integrate everybody properly and have people understand exactly how we can best serve our service members.
It's needed badly, and I feel it's kind of ethically the right thing to do is to serve our veterans, and even if they're active as well. It's just, I don't get it, but that's actually what I wanted to get into. I wanted to get into it later, but let's do it now.
Sure.
Why do you feel that is? Or what do you feel the misconceptions are about them, and how do we address them?
So let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
The misconceptions about, let's just talk about a house hunting
right.
for an active duty service member. They don't have the luxury of what other people have. Oh, you know what, I'm going to look for 6 months, and then for a few months I'm going to go to open houses and look. No, they get 10 days of house hunting leave. So in 10 days, and if they're across the country, like in California, they're coming here, they're flying, that takes away a day.
Right.
They have then to find a house, locate a house, because they have to tell the military where to move their things, right? So they have 8 days to find a house.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Especially in our market, which is slower compared to others across the country. I feel that's very, very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
It's not impossible. And, I mean, obviously they still look, but when it's a competitive market, good luck, you're not here, you're back in California. Right. So they really need a team around them who understands exactly how urgent and non-urgent and the out-of-the-box ways to get a house, so that when they move their entire family for this new billet, it's one less stress on their plate.
So how do you feel the best way is to go about that for them?
So for me...
And you don't have to give away all your secrets.
No, I can speak. I am a military spouse for, my husband's been in for 41 years.
Wow.
Still
thank
active.
You for your service. Amazing.
Thank you. He's retiring this
Yeah.
year, so now we're back. Like Long Island is our place.
Gotcha.
So for me, I would, do the knowledge dump, from wherever I was.
Right.
And then I would locate a realtor, always from a distance, and say, hey, I will be in your area during this week. Can you dedicate this week to finding me a house? And I'd fly across the country, and we would look at every single house on the market and put in whatever offers on any houses that appealed and hope for the best.
How many times did you do that?
To buy a house or to
buy
a house? I want to say maybe 4.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So you have really good perspective and experience compared to the average home buyer, and also from a veteran or active duty member's version, right? You have really good perspective because you have both sides.
Absolutely. And then my son is also in the Navy.
Yep.
And he, right out of college, he bought his first house, but he was deployed, right, on a ship. So how do you buy a house when you're deployed? Well, that's where Mom comes in, and I kind of did the same thing. I went to the area. I narrowed down all the choices that I thought might interest him, and then he got a little tiny window of leave. He came and looked at the houses and said, I like this one, made an offer, and fortunately that one went through.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Then
he bought a second house.
He's very lucky. He's very lucky to have you.
I'm lucky to have you.
Yeah, that's very sweet. But not everyone can pull that off, right? It's obviously you have the advantage of being his mom, but just from an experience level, it's like, think about it from their perspective, to have someone that can take care of all that, especially in such a small amount of time. It sounds very stressful. It's like, as you tell me this, I'm kind of getting a little bit stressed.
No, because
some of the hairs
here's
are falling out.
It's exciting, right? It's a treasure hunt. And that's how I approach. That's why I love real estate. It's a treasure hunt.
It's fun.
What do you want? Oh, you want this? That's impossible. That's all right. Let's find it.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's part of the game. If you gamify it, it does become fun. So let's talk about how long have you been in real estate, and how did you get into real estate? And we'll get into some fun too.
So I actually got into real estate in about 2017. I started property management, and that was when I lived in Washington State. And then we moved a couple times in the interim.
Yeah.
And when I was looking for a house here in Long Island, that is when I first encountered the most discrimination against military home buyers that I had ever encountered, and I was shocked.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Yeah,
because it's illogical, unethical. It's just, for lack of a better term, it's just plain stupid. But let's continue, please. Yeah.
So I was shocked, and since we settled here, because as I said, my husband's retiring, I said I'm going to switch my focus from property management, which I still do, but it's a smaller focus, and I am going to become the person who will treat our military and our veterans with the, I don't want to say respect, but with the and not even deference, with the care, the proper care that they deserve, without preconceived notions. And I feel like if I can help educate our real estate community here on Long Island, it's only going to benefit everybody.
Right. And because of your background and your husband as well, you have, I was trying to find the word here, but it's easier for you because you understand like where they're coming from, right? So you know how to serve it. You can anticipate moves for them 5-10 steps ahead because you've seen it and you've done it yourself.
Correct.
And that is invaluable because buying a home in New York in general is harder than it is compared to other places in the country. Not everywhere, but there's more involved. We have attorneys. It takes time. And especially when you're on a time crunch of house shopping in a short amount of time, you need every advantage that you can get.
Correct. And I do offer a concierge, like house hunting service where I'll narrow things. Everything can be tailored to what fits a scenario, right? Everything can be worked around because
if you have the right person. Yeah, of course.
we can make it work.
I like that.
We can always make it work.
Can-do attitude. Okay, so how did you get into the business before? Well, let's talk about what you did before property management too.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
See, now this is where I'm going to get you because I was a chocolatier.
Yes.
For 10 years, yeah.
I asked that on purpose because Jan was very generous, and I have a chocolate addiction. So it's not like when, someone's like, oh, I like chocolate. Like, I will go through 2 giant jars of Nutella per week in the winter, like a fat bear trying to potentially hibernate. Like, I love it. So Jan was very, very kind and brought me some chocolate from Lazar's in Great Neck. This is not sponsored by Lazar's, but I just acted like it is. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So this looks, should we? No, after lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait. Okay, so you were a chocolatier for how long did you tell me before?
10 years.
10 years.
10 years. I had my own shop.
So I actually want to know, how did you even get into that?
Well, that was a whim. We had actually moved back to the area outside of Seattle that we had lived once before. I ran across my son's kindergarten friend's parent who had a chocolate shop.
Gotcha.
And we talked about just maybe partnering up. They ended up getting a divorce, so I said, I can do that.
Oh.
And I did that.
Lovely.
Yeah.
You just took it over.
I did. And trial by fire, I took over the shop on February 1st. Valentine's Day is February 14th, and I didn't have enough inventory, so I figured it out.
I feel like that's a good problem to have, though. You sell out.
Oh, I never like to sell out.
Yeah.
I don't like to say no when somebody wants something that I have the power to give them. I would like to give that to them, so right. I worked a lot that couple of weeks.
Yeah, I can imagine that must have been stressful and hard to manage.
But fun.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
Fun. See, I have this thing, Ben. I say it's time to jan up.
Ooh, what does that mean? I like that.
It's time to jan up.
Just like instead of man up, like
instead
jan
of man up, it's time to jan up.
Time to jan
Let's
up.
see you do it, Ben.
I like
it's time
that.
to jan up.
Just
right.
I'm janning on up.
That's right.
Oh, we're getting there.
Even
Pumping.
I'm not a morning person. All right, it's time to jan up.
I like
Get
that
up
actually.
out of bed.
That was this. It's good to have a saying like that switches your brain on. Mel, do you know who Mel Robbins is?
Yes.
So are you familiar with what is it, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule, whatever
Yes,
it is? So
whatever.
it's very similar, except it's quicker than 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's jan up.
Right.
Right,
And
just
you
like
don't
get
even have
to
to
it.
say it out loud. It's time to jan up. If it's something I'm uncomfortable with, it's time to jan up.
And do it.
I'm going to do it.
How bad could it really be anyway? It depends on what it is.
And sometimes it can be bad, but you know what? That's okay because I did it.
Because you janned up.
I janned up.
Okay, I want to talk more about chocolate before we talk about real estate for selfish reasons. No one else cares, but I do. Top 3 chocolate brands for milk chocolate or recommendations.
So I'm not a huge fan of the mass market.
Understandably.
When I had my shop, I made my own blends of French and Belgian chocolate that I would mix into my truffles. I'm a huge snob. Anything
That was a very snobby thing, but honestly, it spoke to my inner snob, so I like it. Keep going, please.
Anything that has a creamy, in the milk chocolate realm, anything that has a creamy mouthfeel. I don't like anything astringent.
Yeah.
I don't like it. Dark chocolate is difficult because a lot of it makes your mouth kind of dry out a little
Agreed.
bit. So when you find a dark chocolate that doesn't do that,
It's hard to find.
it's hard to find. Calibo makes a good chocolate. Let me think.
I'll wait all day for this.
Because I have to switch. I have to switch
th-
from my
this is
realtor
important.
brain to the chocolate brain. Calibo was my favorite, actually.
I've never heard of Calibo.
Calibo is, they don't mass produce chocolates,
Right.
but they make chocolate
Got it.
for, and it's very good.
It's like
French.
special occasion
It's called
type
Berry
thing.
Calibo. It's the base. So when you make chocolates, right, you take those big bars or little, they're called pistoles. They're already processed chocolate that is sent out in bulk for chocolatiers to manufacture with as their base.
I see.
And I would say Calico.
So a lot of
is
people
my
have the
favorite.
same base.
Yes, but it's expensive. It depends on,
Right.
Valrhona is very elite, very expensive chocolate from France.
Never heard of these.
The chocolate is
I
amazing.
feel like an amateur.
But they actually didn't. They have a little bit of a bias against small manufacturers because they had, the White House, for example.
Ah, I see.
They had larger manufacturers that used them. But when you could get a Valrhona chocolate and incorporate it into a truffle, it was always very good.
That sounds freaking amazing,
It was.
honestly. I haven't eaten today. Okay. Did you have another one? Or are you good at Calico and Verona? Or Valrhona?
There is one more. We'll have to come back to it because I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. This is I've never heard of these companies, which again I'm kind of embarrassed by.
But again,
Hey, I'm learning.
they're
The
not
more you
companies where they don't manufacture truffles, which
Right.
is what I specialized in.
Yes, I've learned. Yeah.
But they for a base chocolate, they're excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much.
And you also have to be very careful because the chocolate industry is so corrupt with child labor,
Yeah.
slave labor. So you have to be very careful. It's always best to go with an origin type chocolate where they can tell you
Like how it was sourced.
how it was sourced, what
Yeah.
plantation, how is it a fair trade organization? Fair trade is another one that's, but you can find out how do they compensate their employees?
Right.
How do they compensate these plantation farms, and go from there.
Do you have a favorite American chocolate?
Well, mine was, but it no longer
Well,
exists.
yeah, we can't go with that.
Are we talking like a mass-produced chocolate?
Let's do both.
Okay, because I can tell you honestly, for mass-produced, I'm happy with the Dove.
Yeah, I
those
like
little
Dove.
Doves because they're creamy.
Yeah, Dove's
Um,
great.
As far as local places, I would say anybody who manufactures on site, who makes their things on site, who uses more of a higher end base.
Yeah,
I'm just a snob, as I said,
it's good.
about chocolate. So I
Right.
always ask what chocolate base do they use.
Right.
A lot of times they don't want to tell you. If they don't want to tell me, I assume it's probably a lower end chocolate, and I'll try it. But
Yeah,
I
the
won't
average
buy.
person doesn't think this way.
Right.
But now it's like I'm slowly through this conversation becoming a chocolate snob myself. As opposed to just an addict, at least I can I could spruce it up. You're like, I'm not a chocolate addict, thanks to Jen. I am a chocolate connoisseur. After
Actually,
5-minute conversation.
We should, every time we do this, we should test a different local chocolate.
That's freaking genius,
Let's
actually.
do it. Let's do
Oh
it.
my
I have
God.
actually had.
It's really dangerous, but we should do it.
I've had parties, tasting parties, where I would invite my friends and family over, and we would lay out all different kinds of base chocolate
That's genius.
and make notes. And I relied on those,
yeah.
and it was really fun. So
You weren't doing it for marketing purposes. You
I
were
was
doing
for
it because
my
you
own-
genuinely knew, but it probably worked double as a marketing type of device.
No, it was just for me to. I made my own truffles.
Yeah.
And every truffle had a different base. Some, if it skewed fruity, I needed fruity. Just, I made really good truffles.
Damn it. All right. We're done with the. Actually, we're probably not done with the chocolate, but time-wise, we're doing good. Let's get back to VA loans and how you feel veterans are treated, basically across the housing community. Can you give us kind of like a recap of how you feel they're treated and what you think needs to be done, or what just the average agent, realtor, loan officer even needs to do to better serve that community?
Well, first, let me preface this by
Please.
saying you're the one who taught me so much about mortgage products.
Thank
'Cause
you.
You're the go-to guy, so it was
Appreciate it.
nice of you to give me the plug, but it's all you.
Thank you.
It's very area specific. If you if those service members are located in a high military presence community,
Right.
well, then it's really not a problem. Everybody takes VA loans. Everybody understands VA loans. Everybody understands, most people understand the different pressures, and the real estate market is formulated to cater to accept them.
Right.
When you're in an area like we're in here, there are some misconceptions. It used to be, a while back that VA loans were difficult to close, and they had a lot of stringent requirements,
Right.
and that they were hard to deal with.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case.
Yeah, they may have been maybe a decade ago, 2 decades ago, but now that's not at all.
No longer the case. And as you know, VA loan rates are often lower
Yeah.
than the conventional
I'd say
loan.
99% of the time they're
Right.
lower. Yeah.
And they do require a VA inspector.
Right.
So you can't just go off the street and pick your favorite inspector and think that's good. No, they do require a VA inspector. There was a bit of a backlog at some points in time, but there's not anymore. VA loans close just as quickly.
When there was a backlog, though, it wasn't just a backlog that was specific to VA. It was just the entire community. There were no appraisers. It would take so long to get people to schedule.
Right.
So it's just like, it felt like it because and from an agent's perspective, I don't mean you specifically, but let's say one on another transaction, it may feel that way because it's not like if you have an appraisal panel with a specific company where you're familiar with the company, when you order through the VA portal and you don't have control, it gives you the perception that it's longer or it's slower, but it's just different because you're not in there yourself.
Right.
But it's really the same.
Right. And stronger. Yeah. I mean, if a person is granted a VA loan approval,
right.
that VA loan approval is almost guaranteed to close. I mean, how many times have you had your agents get to a closing table and right at the last minute almost the loans fall through? That doesn't really happen with VA loans.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Well, it doesn't happen with us, period.
Right.
But with VA loans more specifically, yes. And this is a statistic Jan has heard me say probably 10 times by now. But VA loans have the lowest declination rates compared to FHA and VA. FHA and conventional. FHA has about a 14% declination rate. I think it's 14.7. And conventional was 14.3. These are 2023 numbers, I believe. And VA is only 7.4%, something like that. So statistically speaking, if you have a VA loan, you as an offer for your listing or your house that you're selling, it has a higher chance of closing compared to FHA and conventional.
Correct.
And it's just weird that people don't want to take them. And they're also the highest performing loans in terms of them actually paying their mortgage. Veterans pay far more often than FHA or conventional do.
Well, they have a consistent paycheck, so they pay their bills.
Yeah, and I think that and just general discipline, responsibility. I mean, that type of culture, if it usually seeps into your finances and your life.
It
usually.
does. Well, in some areas of the military where you need a security clearance.
Yeah.
Well, you have to maintain good, solid credit. So people who have a security clearance have good credit. They have consistent.
I didn't know that they require that. That's interesting.
Well, because if you have bad credit or maybe you're in debt, well then to whom are you in debt and how are you then
going to repay it? Maybe you'll do something
How
silly.
are you vulnerable?
Right.
So but that's a completely...
There's the same requirement for mortgage loan officers, by the way.
Yeah.
We have to have decent credit. Do all of us do? No. But, it's
do
okay.
you?
It happens. It depends on the day. Sometimes I'm a 4, sometimes I'm an 8. Just switches up back and forth. But, yeah. So, what do you feel can be done or needs to be done to essentially educate the community or basically just make realtors and loan officers more comfortable with VA loans?
Well, let's speak about, I think, the even bigger misconception that permeates this area.
Yeah.
VA loan borrowers are not required to put down any down payment.
Right.
It's a zero down. Technically, it's a zero down loan. So around here, people think, oh, well, then they don't have any skin in the game.
Right.
They don't have enough money. You know, they can't afford this house. They don't care. They're going to back out at the last minute. Well, let's think about things. One, we already talked about.
Right.
They need that house. They don't have time between organizing the move, the kids, the schools, the new billet, whether it's, you know, whatever the base is or whatever the assignment is. There's no time to be backing out. It's hard enough to find a house.
Right.
But
people have better things to do. Yeah.
there's too many things to do. But taking that aside, there are so many expenses that the military, active duty, this is what we're talking about, incur in a move. They have to pay everything up front. People think, oh, you know, the military pays for the move and they pay for the lodging and they pay for, well, they do to an extent, but not up front.
Right.
So people have to have a big chunk of money to pay for the move, and they get reimbursed on the back end.
Yeah, so they have it.
They have it, but they need it for physically moving, you know, their entire world to another place.
So, Jan, let me ask you this then. How do you handle with your veterans and military EMDs, right? That they, you know, if the seller side wants something down, do you educate them, the veterans up front, and say, hey, you got to put X amount down, but you get it refunded or be applied to this? How do you handle those situations?
So generally, when I speak with clients, I say, I understand it's a zero down. I'm not asking that you come up with a big 20% down payment like conventional mortgages often require.
Yeah.
But people do want to see that you have that skin in the game. So if you put down a deposit, right, whether it's $5,000, $10,000, just to show that you are interested in the house, you don't plan on backing out, it can roll into closing costs. It's not money that you will lose. It's still
it's still yours. You can get it refunded at closing.
Yeah,
so
it's not money that will go away, but it shows people that you are interested in the house, and they're in so many parts of the country that's not necessary.
Right.
I find it to be a little more necessary here, so I do advise.
Yeah, it's something. So what Jan and I are talking about specifically is the earnest money deposit that if you're buying a house that you're putting down on contract. So for instance, veterans, they're not required to put any money down, but that doesn't mean that a seller, or more specifically a seller's attorney, will allow that to happen, right? So if you're a veteran and you're looking to do zero down, you can, but a lot of people, or sellers rather, will insist that you put something down, some skin in the game, as Jan just said, right? And that money, again, doesn't have to be part of the down payment of your home. You could still have a 100% LTV, aka 0% financing loan with putting money down on contract, and that money will just simply be refunded to you at closing or applied to your closing costs, assuming you have any, or you have to come out of pocket, because you can't even get a seller's concession to cover all those closing costs. But what I would love for you to talk about, Jan, is that realistic in this market right now, do you feel?
Because it is a seller's market.
Yeah.
It's a double hurdle to get my fellow agents to consider the VA loan,
right,
and then to understand that just because it's not 20% down or whatever 10% down, whatever they're looking for, that it's not a solid loan. As we talked about, it's a much more solid loan. But I do find that when there's a more of a one-on-one discussion with a fellow agent that lays out the pros and cons of this particular loan type or whatever offer, I think people do understand, but it's the knee-jerk reaction. I don't want to do it. Inspection's too hard. They're going to make me paint. They want a handrail put in.
Yeah, which you'll need with other loans anyway,
right.
Yeah.
It's just, I think that the more knowledgeable people become and the more understanding they are that this loan product is so solid.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go a long way. We just really need to get the word out there.
It's a good opportunity for me to go on a little sales pitch. Not only are they solid loans, but they are technically the best loans in the country. No monthly mortgage insurance, 0% down, amazing interest rates. The VA loan is the best mortgage product, as it should be.
As it should
in
be.
the country. Yes, is there sometimes a VA guarantee fee? Of course, but this isn't something that we have to come out of pocket for. It's typically rolled in. A lot of veterans are exempt as well. So that's the only negative of the VA loan, but otherwise it's freaking awesome. It's just such a great loan product. I mean, like, I've met people, like, in the business, right, who, like, learn about VA loans. They're like, should I join the reserves for 4 years so I can get a VA loan? And it's just like, if you want to, you know, at least you're serving two birds, right? So,
and it's also not free for the veteran,
right.
Which,
you
know, people, there is a funding fee.
Yep.
And the first time is 1.5, right?
Yep. Well, it depends on level of service, etc.
Right, but assuming they're not 100% or have a disability, or they do have to pay a funding fee, and that does come out of the service member's pocket.
Yeah.
Right, so that is, like you said, it can be rolled into the loan, but that's another expense.
Well, it's rolled into the loan by default.
Correct.
Right, so that's just how it goes. I've never actually met a veteran that wants to pay it out of pocket themselves. Some have, like, spoken about it. There's one guy in particular, obviously I can't mention client names, but someone was thinking about it for a while, and then by the end of the transaction, it was like, nah, just roll it in. It's going to, lower my mortgage by $17 a month. I'd rather just, have the money. But that's to each their own, right?
Well, we have paid it because we've, put deposits down. Like
oh, yeah. Oh, so you
houses.
used it to apply, you took the deposit. That's interesting. That's a good strategy, too.
So, we would have X amount of money that we were willing to put down, as a down payment.
I now have met one. You're the first one I've met. Excellent. Okay,
yeah.
so that.
But that's
so
all
that's
personal finances. That's what works best for every family. So, and it's just available to not only our service members but the veterans.
Right.
And it's even possible. We were discussing this just before this podcast, where a veteran can utilize a VA loan and still buy a house with somebody who's not a veteran, as long as they're living in the same house, and it's just as easy, and you can get, at least for a portion of that loan, a better mortgage rate.
Right, and it changes because it depends whether the veteran, as you know, is married to the spouse or not, whether you have to put money down, this, that, but it's still doable, right? I'd still, let's say hypothetically, that you're buying a house with someone that you're not married to as a veteran, right? And then you have to put, let's say, 11% down, which is usually where it falls. It's still a better deal than conventional, even if you have to put the 11% down. Because, like, most people would be like, oh, if I'm putting the money down, go to conventional anyway. It's like you have 11% down. And don't get me wrong, conventional is not bad. I mean, often conventional is great. But VA is just better. You won't have the mortgage insurance, and you'll have a lower rate. Right, so it's in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. But when I push too much, I seem biased, which I am. But at the same time, people don't like taking advice from biased people.
Well, it's for a good reason. But it's a benefit. Yeah. So there are beneficial aspects to it. That's why it's a benefit, right? So it's not. I don't think that you're pushing it. It's just you're pointing out the benefits of this particular product.
Yeah, best loan in the world. I mean, yeah, it's great. Okay, so Jan, let's talk about some other fun stuff. Okay, what do you feel, this is a good one, what do you feel some misconceptions that agents have, other than like appraisal issues, are when it comes to dealing with VA loans, or even attorneys? Have you come across anything?
Of course.
Yeah.
Aside from the things we discussed, there also seems to be a misconception that that the military can't afford to buy in nice neighborhoods.
I have to watch my life. What?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I've never heard that before. That's insane.
Well,
it also doesn't make sense because it goes by the loan limits of the areas. I mean, what does that have to do? That doesn't make sense.
The cost of living here is very high.
Yeah.
Military are not historically, paid like millionaires.
Yes.
However, here, since it is a high cost of living area, the active duty military are given an allowance for housing. So if they don't live on a base, which there really aren't very many bases here, they're given an allowance to contribute toward, housing. Well, the allowances here are very high.
Yeah, which, by the way, can be grossed up for underwriting purposes. Wink.
Very high. And they're not taxed. So if a military member who in another part of the country couldn't afford to move into a higher end neighborhood says, I want to move to this neighborhood, well, they probably have the means because of the housing allowance. And so guaranteed, if they are pre-approved for a VA loan and they're looking in the neighborhoods that come under that pre-approval loan limit, they can afford it.
Yeah, and it's not like a magic thing. It's just like, it's funny that you have to say it, because like, from my perspective, it's just, that is logical. That just makes sense. You can fund it. It's not an issue. But again, I'm sitting at a desk all day. I'm not out there in the streets like you guys and getting deals done and all the fun stuff.
If you remember, though, with all the subprime stuff, people were given loans that they couldn't really afford in the long term, and there were all kinds of, weird products. And I think that a wariness came into play. Yeah. But that doesn't apply to a VA loan.
Yeah, I'm still just amazed by how much you know about VA loans. I'm assuming, Jan, do you have any other formal education on just VA loans, or when it comes to home buying, or is it all just experience? I mean, and other than the CEs, obviously.
Well, obviously, I mean, when I am not with a client, I'm training. Yeah. Because knowledge is power. And
we talked about this the other day. Jan's always you're always going and doing CEs and trainings and all this stuff. Yeah,
it's valuable. I mean, I don't want to misinform anybody, whether they're my client or whether it's just somebody asking me a question. I want to know the right answer. Yeah. And I was so misinformed in my coming up, trying to figure out my way. I met my husband when I was 19 years old, and we've been together ever since. And we bumbled our way through together. And incredible. We were poor. Yeah. Because he was just a listed guy from Pennsylvania, and I was a blue collar girl from Jersey, and we
come a long way.
Well, so thank you, but life is life, right? We learn as we go, and I've always had a two-pronged outlook on life. One is service, right? I want to always affect people positively. I never want to be the person that says something that sticks in a person's brain in a negative way, right? Especially children, right? So I never want to be that memory. And so service is really important, and treating people with care. Hospitality, it is everywhere. Business is hospitality. It doesn't matter what the business is, right? Business is making the person with whom you're working understand that they're valuable. Not just feel valuable, but understand that they're valuable. Yeah. So that's my approach to everything. That's my approach to life.
I've never actually heard an explanation like that, and I absolutely love that. I think it's beautiful. It's quite deep as well, because it can be very fulfilling to give.
Correct.
Right? Very. And I see it, now that we've met many times through CE, and you're here finally, I shouldn't say finally, but because it's not.
Well, you finally invited me.
That's true,
right?
Yeah. I usually just wait for people to ask, honestly, and then I look at my calendar. I was like, I got no podcast schedule. I was like, all right, let's go get them. But no, because what you just said, I have witnessed and experienced it through interacting with you. Every class, Jan is at the front, interacting, asking good questions. If other people are talking too much, you know how to kind of break that as well and help me out a little bit.
Thank you.
I notice. Thank you. Appreciate that. And also, you notice sometimes when I need the break, and you let them go anyway. But either way, my point is that you don't just talk it, you do it. Right? And I see that in both ends. I see your positivity and how much you actually care, and I also see it through you learning and trying to actually become the best realtor and person, I should also say person possible, because I assume that, you feel like growth never ends, right? We can always get
Right.
better. We can always keep learning. And I feel the same way, honestly, because when we
I know you
stop
do.
doing new things and learning and trying, it's when you could say that you stay the same, but in many ways that you also regress because you're not practicing, you're not challenging yourself. And when people say you're either improving or you're declining, I believe that. Of course, there's a little section where you're at that point where you're not doing anything. But it's a healthier way and a happier way to live life, really.
It is. It is. I mean, let's be frank. There are some pretty terrible people out there.
Yeah.
Right. But instead of feeling like I am so negatively impacted by that, I actually am driven to prevent that negativity from bleeding into somebody with whom I'm interacting. It doesn't matter. It's just, that's my own, it's just how I put back. And that takes me to something we haven't really discussed. I have started a program now that people are very suspicious about because it's completely no strings attached.
Tell us about it.
No strings attached. I have no ulterior motives. If a military service member, a veteran, a first responder, law enforcement, firefighter works with me, whether it's buying a house, selling a house, doing a referral, whatever money I get for compensation, it doesn't matter how much or how little, 20% goes right back into the pocket of that person.
That's amazing.
That's what I do.
That is incredible.
And it's no strings. I have no ulterior motive. I have been given so much in this world from other people. The military has given my family a difficult but stable and happy life. My children have been very well educated. Coming from essentially nothing to coming to a place where I can make a difference, that's it.
It's incredibly generous, and it's an amazing deal as well. It really is from that perspective. If you're a buyer or a seller, you should reach out to Jan right now.
Even referrals, as I said.
Yeah.
And if somebody reaches out to me for a referral, say they want to move to Florida, I don't just throw a name at them. I actually find a vetted professional that I have already interacted with, that I trust, and I don't just throw them to the wolves. If you were to come to me and need help with the house, and I say, okay, I have Jan over here in Florida, I'll hold your hand. You can call me and say, I'm having trouble with this, Jan. Well, okay, I'm going to step in and maybe liaise a little bit, make things easy. It's all about making things easy. And then I extend it. So if you are the child, now grown, of a military member, former firefighter, former police officer, I give 10% to you. You know why? Because your life was impacted. You had to grow up with that service life. Even though it wasn't your choice, you deserve something back from me as far as I'm concerned.
We have to get this message out there because it's, again, incredibly generous for someone of your caliber in this business. To me, I see you, at the top, right, as someone that cares and is professional. It's because you said it before. I know you weren't talking about this business specifically, but I am now, is that we do have terrible people in the mortgage and the real estate business. Is it a lot of people? No, it's probably a very small percentage, but they get the most notoriety because whatever they do is quite crazy. But keep in mind, I think a couple of years ago, there was, 1 million realtors, and that number has been reduced down to about 400 and something thousand now. So hopefully those people are out. But point is that to come across someone that I consider special in the business, that cares and is lives and breathes it, you'd be silly not to work with you. Honestly, it would be if I was a veteran. that's what I would do.
What if you weren't a veteran?
Of course, that's also as well.
Because I don't just work with veterans.
That's true. Okay, so let's get into something else then, because I did want to talk about general just real estate advice for someone looking to buy now, or actually let's say over the next 3 to 6 months, because it's volatile time, everyone's freaking out. My answer to this is very simple, but I'm not asking me, I'm asking you. So what advice do you have for buyers right now who are thinking about buying in the next few months?
For buyers.
Yeah. We'll do sellers too after.
This might not come across as very popular in my fellow agent community.
I like this. I like controversial. Let's do it.
A buyer should always, always, always be represented by a buyer's agent. Do not get sucked into, the seller is selling the house and the agent's at the open house, and you know what? I'll just represent you. No.
Right.
No. I personally don't believe that a seller's agent can independently and unconditionally represent a buyer.
Yeah.
Because their loyalty
There's conflict of interest. It doesn't make any sense.
And there are so many agents out there who say, well, you'll save this and I'll do it for free. No. Get a buyer's agent. If you have to pay, hopefully it's going to be rolled over into the seller cost like it's always been.
Right.
But there's all this new...
These days we have to change it.
These days are a little different.
But it can still be done.
It can still be done. It's part of the offer.
Right.
Even if you have to come out of pocket to pay a buyer's agent at the back end, do it. They're probably going to save you money.
With the right one, let's add to that.
With the right one.
Yeah.
They're probably going to save you money because they are probably going to be able to negotiate a good deal for you.
Right.
But they have your best interests at heart. I mean, that percentage that you're paying is well worth it. If a decent buyer's agent, if they can't negotiate such that it's covered, it's still well worth it.
Yeah, and so from a monetary perspective, it's worth it. But can you talk about, just very briefly, the non-monetary aspect? Think about the stress that buyers go through when buying a home, the anxiety they experience. They need someone to hold their hand, which when I say that they need someone to hold their hand, in your head, the average person is probably like, Ben, I don't want to pay that much just for someone to hold my hand. Trust me, you do. You do. It's not fun. So please chat about that a little bit, Jan.
I mean, it's a massive emotional overload when you're thinking about taking so much money, your life savings a lot of times, to buy a house. I mean, there's all the excitement, right? Yeah, the whole new life is coming, and you found this. It's so exciting, but there are so many avenues that can trip you up, that can cost you money, that can maybe create friction with you and your partner, because
that's a big one.
That's a big one, and emotional well-being is key. A good buyer's agent is going to be able to steer you to a qualified, vetted team who can streamline, make things easy. But the biggest key thing that a lot of agents miss and that a lot of clients need is communication. Right. You might know that you're not going to hear back from the appraiser for 10 days, right? You might know that, right?
Good point.
But a person doesn't know that, especially if it's their first time buying a house, and they're just nervous, and why haven't we heard, and oh no, something's going to be wrong. Communicate. A good agent is going to say, hey, it'll be 10 days. If you have any questions, reach out to me. After 3 days, 4 days, maybe send a reminder. Everything's on track. A good agent is going to check with the attorney to make sure there are no glitches, and then convey that. Like, it's not my job to just hold on to it. I need to
which is also very, very rare of people in our business to do it. And it will eliminate, I can't say all, but a tremendous amount of the anxiety and stress involved. And it's something that my team and I, we make sure to take the time to do, because obviously it's the right thing to do for the consumer, but what a lot of professionals don't realize, it's also the right thing to do for yourself, not just from an ethical perspective, but from an efficiency perspective. If you take 5 minutes in the beginning to explain to your client the process, so let's say from a mortgage side, I explain when the earnest money is due, Why, for instance, sometimes people that pay their insurance before closing, you can also pay at closing, but sometimes people do it before. Why? How does that get factored? The cost of an appraisal, the timeline, taking 5 minutes, maybe 10 to explain this stuff will stop clients from texting you at weird times of the day or the night with them freaking out. It's because you've taken the time to basically make them more calm. And then on top of it, they have a better experience anyway. And because they have the better experience, what do? They refer you to people and your business grows. It's another no-brainer that everyone should do, but not everyone does.
And why would you want to?
Right.
To me, that's why wouldn't you want to? I just don't understand.
Laziness. I think it's laziness. Laziness is one. The other thing, Jan, is that for a lot of mortgage people and real estate people, especially those that are new, they don't view it as like a consultation. They view it as like a selling or a tough conversation where they could potentially lose the client. And in what world does explaining how the process works enable you to lose a client? I don't know, but I think some people feel that it just leads to more questions and it can make the client more neurotic. But if you do it in the right way, and I'm not saying everyone can get this down right away, it takes practice. I'll give you an example, Jan. Before I was in the mortgage business, my college job, I was a personal trainer. One of my best friends ran this boot camp, and we had 200 clients, and it was fun. And I was always terrified because I had to do public speaking, meaning that before we did a class, they were 45-minute classes, I would have to explain to everyone, what to do and how to do it, all the exercises. And I was always terrified, especially in the beginning, because it was public speaking. I was 18, 19 years old, talking to people much older than me, more professional, life experience, etc. It was very intimidating. So what I would do, I would simply just practice. On my drive to work every day, I would literally go over the explanations of the exercises in my car as I was doing it, and then I would get there about 15 minutes early and then physically do it before we started the class. And that not only made my anxiety and delivery better, but it became more enjoyable, and I got better over time. So if you feel that you're a little nervous on explaining the process, or let's say if you're a realtor and you don't understand the mortgage side, talk to your loan officer. Have your loan officer explain the process to you so you can then help your client with that. It requires you to be a little bit more inquisitive, but as I like to say, actually care about your business and care about your client experience. And sometimes that requires us to go through a little bit of growth and a little bit of hardship in order to get to that point. But that's life. Otherwise, we stay the same.
And what is that, Ben? It's time to jan
up. Time to jan up. That's actually, wow. Okay, I think we went for a while. Sorry, Anthony. We do this all the time. Okay, so any final words of wisdom for the people of America?
I would say trust your team.
Like that?
Find an agent with a trusted team. I mean,
yeah.
That really is. Trust your agent, trust your team. If you get a bad feeling, step away.
Yeah.
If you have questions, ask the questions. It's all about going into this transaction and this experience and coming out better on the other end. That's it.
Yeah.
So,
it's harder than it sounds, but it can be done.
It can be done.
Also, I ask that question pretty much all the time to wrap up with, and no one's given that, so that's a great one. Janet Straub, thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure, and we will do this again.
Ben Lavender, you're the best.
Thank you. Appreciate you. That was awesome.